Today's News of Taiwan broadcast, July 27, 2026.
Welcome back to The Explainer. Look, if you're trying to cut through the absolute noise of the morning news cycle, you are in the exact right place. Today, we're taking a massive, chaotic web of global and local updates, and we're transforming it into a highly structured briefing. My goal is to give you the facts you need to know, neatly organized, so you can just jump right in and start your day informed and focused. Now, you might be wondering, what on earth do a 5.6 magnitude earthquake, a former police officer stealing bananas, and Marvel's Doctor Doom actually have in common? On the surface, absolutely nothing. But together, they perfectly represent the sheer, unpredictable variety of today's news cycle. My promise to you is that we are going to neatly organize all of this chaos together. So, here is our roadmap for today. We'll hit local hazards and health, then bizarre local society incidents, move on to global affairs and incidents, and wrap up with sports and entertainment. All right, kicking things off with Section 1, Local Hazards and Health. Okay, let's dive right into this. If you felt a violent up-and-down shaking last night at around 8:36 p.m., well, that was a 5.6 magnitude earthquake hitting New Taipei's Shuangxi District. And here is why it felt so intense. This was a deep-layer earthquake, striking at a depth of 95.7 kilometers. Because it actually happened within the tectonic plate itself, it generated these high-frequency waves that were felt strongly across multiple counties. It literally even temporarily slowed down our transit systems. Now, the Seismology Center is warning that we absolutely cannot rule out aftershocks ranging from 4.5 to 5.0 in the coming week, so please keep your disaster readiness plans updated. But the quake isn't the only thing to keep on your radar today. We've got 3 other rapid-fire local health and environmental alerts for you. First up, there's a new COVID-19 strain going around, NB.1.8.1. It's driving up clinic visits with reports of severe knife-like sore throats. The older vaccines might actually lack efficacy against this specific variant, and Taipei clinics are currently out of stock. But don't panic, the CDC is rushing 6,000 new doses in for July 27th and 28th. Second, you might want to check your veggies. A massive batch of imported white radishes was just found with 0.1 ppm of the pesticide clothianidin. To put that into perspective, that is 5 times the legal limit. And because this is a systemic pesticide, it gets absorbed straight into the root, so you can't just wash or peel it off. The shipment was huge, so some may have already hit the market. Definitely monitor your purchases. Lastly, if you happen to see a giant swarm of green locusts in the Shuangxi Bay area, take a breath. The agricultural department confirms it's just a normal seasonal migration. They're totally harmless, just shoo them away. Moving right along to Section 2, Bizarre Local Society Incidents. And this next one brilliantly illustrates how human behavior can entirely subvert intended design. Think about the intended use of a Keeling automatic car wash, spraying foam and high-pressure water onto vehicles, right? Well, recently, 2 men, stripped completely down to their boxer shorts, decided to use the automated car wash as a personal shower while their friends just stood outside laughing. Now, while the whole setup looks undeniably comical, I really want to draw your attention to the crucial safety takeaway here. High-pressure car wash wands are absolutely not shower heads. The water pressure is over 30 times stronger than what you'd use in your own bathroom. Standing directly under one can cause severe skin lacerations and real bodily harm. It's a prime example of a foolish prank carrying hidden, dangerous consequences. Speaking of poor decision-making, get this. An old lady said if I wanted to eat bananas, I could just pick them myself. That right there was the actual legal defense presented by a former police officer in Tainan. He was caught scaling a wall with a sickle, trespassing onto a farmer's property right behind his own precinct, just to harvest 2 bunches of bananas. The punchline to this mini-narrative is the incredibly severe consequence of petty theft, especially when you're a law enforcement officer. Unsurprisingly, the courts did not buy the old lady excuse. For stealing those 2 bunches of bananas, a couple of avocado saplings, and even swiping toilet paper from his own station, he was sentenced to 10 months in prison. It's a whole career completely derailed by absolute absurdity. Okay, let's zoom out a bit for Section 3, Global Affairs and Incidents. We start in Germany, where we have some incredibly heavy news. On July 25th, a tragic terror attack occurred at the Berlin Pride Parade. A suspect drove a vehicle into the crowd and then subsequently attacked attendees with a machete. The toll right now stands at 1 dead and 29 injured. Police have arrested a 21-year-old Lebanese-German suspect named Borde. Authorities have classified this as an Islamist terrorist attack, and they noted that the suspect was actually already on a watch list after a previous attempt to join ISIS in Syria. In the wake of this, leaders have strongly urged unity in the face of this targeted violence against the LGBTQ+ community. So the crucial point to take away from this next situation is really just how fast international standoffs can escalate and then suddenly de-escalate. We're looking at a 15-day window breaking down the complex U.S.-Iran situation. Over that period, Iran claimed to have destroyed multiple U.S. aircraft, though those details still remain unverified. Interestingly, right around day 13, on July 24th, President Trump suddenly halted a planned wave of military strikes against Iran. Reports indicate his advisors actually warned him about depleting ammunition stockpiles and the unpredictable ripple effects of a full-scale escalation. Yet, literally just a day later, U.S. Central Command intercepted Iranian tankers for allegedly violating blockades. It's an incredibly delicate, high-stakes geopolitical dance happening in real time. And speaking of international relations, sometimes diplomacy happens entirely at the civilian level, with rapid cause and effect. It went like this. Step 1. A group of Italian students in Thailand behaved terribly on a Bangkok subway, loudly disrespecting locals and making offensive gestures when they were asked to quiet down. Step 2. Thai netizens mobilized instantly, tracking the students' social media right back to their hotel. And Step 3. The backlash was so swift that the Italian embassy actually had to step in and issue an official apology, while the students were escorted to a police station to publicly apologize and pay a fine of up to 2,000 baht. Just a viral lesson in respecting your host country, for sure. All right, let's shift gears completely for our final section, sports and entertainment. Let's bring it back home to celebrate some local athletes who are just absolutely crushing it on the global stage right now. Cho Tan-chan just made history in badminton, winning the China Open and a massive $140,000 prize. He's now the oldest Super 1000 winner and, incredibly, the very first purely homegrown Taiwanese player to achieve this. In baseball, Lee Hao-yu is on absolute fire for the Tigers, hitting his 6th home run and riding a 10-game hit streak that literally has fans printing custom t-shirts for him. Meanwhile, Pan Wen-hui just secured his 3rd hold with a solid 4.91 ERA, cementing the expectations that he is going to be a key closer for the upcoming Asian Games. Finally, we literally cannot talk about entertainment today without bringing up the absolute madness out of San Diego Comic-Con. Marvel just completely shattered the internet. Robert Downey Jr. is returning to the MCU, but not as Iron Man. He is stepping in as the iconic villain Doctor Doom. We also learned that Ryan Gosling is officially joining the universe as Ghost Rider in 2028, and the legacy of Wakanda continues, with British actor David Johns slated to take over the mantle of Black Panther in December of 2028, playing T'Challa's grown-up son. The hype right now is absolutely unreal. So, we have covered a massive amount of ground today. We went from the depths of a tectonic earthquake and local health hazards to bizarre car wash antics, all the way to global terror, international diplomacy, and finally, huge superhero resurrections. Here is my final question for you. With a world bouncing between so many wild extremes, how will you use this structured information to better navigate your own day? Thank you so much for choosing to learn efficiently with me today. Stay focused, stay curious, and I will catch you in the next explainer.
Imagine just a plastic tub of unused hair bleach. Right? It's sitting quietly on a counter in a Taiwan hair salon. Nobody has touched it. Nobody has moved it.
Right, just a totally mundane object.
Exactly, but suddenly it erupts, just this violent plume of thick white smoke, and it leaves behind this charred, bubbling crater. Or, picture a 660-ton steel pendulum suspended way up high inside the Taipei 101 skyscraper, and it suddenly swings to counteract a massive jolt from, 95 kilometers underground.
It really puts things into perspective, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Today, we are looking at these invisible tripwires that are constantly threatening our illusion of stability.
Because we really do navigate our daily routines relying heavily on that illusion, We categorize our environment as safe, predictable. But when you examine the raw data from just a single day, the fragility of that equilibrium becomes pretty undeniable.
Which is exactly what we are doing on this deep dive. We're taking a single, seemingly random global news cycle, specifically a morning broadcast out of Taiwan from late July 2026. And you, sitting there listening, you're going to join us as we sift through this incredibly chaotic stack of headlines.
It's a fascinating cross-section, honestly.
It really is. We are looking at everything from deeper seismic events to bizarre local crimes and international geopolitics. The mission here is to extract the hidden scientific, legal, and cultural patterns that dictate how your world actually works.
Right, because often the most valuable insights into the mechanics of our society, they're hiding in the margins of these seemingly disconnected stories.
So let's jump right into the ground beneath our feet, because this broadcast kicks off with a magnitude 6.6 earthquake in Taiwan, centered in the Shuangxi District of New Taipei.
Yeah, a really significant event.
Oh, totally. It completely halted the metro and the train lines across the north. And you mentioned the Taipei 101 earlier. That quake was strong enough to make the building's tuned mass damper actively engage. I mean, I've seen pictures of that thing. It looks like a giant gold-painted bowling ball just suspended by cables. But how does it actually stop a skyscraper from snapping in half?
Well, it's actually a brilliant piece of engineering, and it's all based on inertia. A tuned mass damper, it doesn't actually stop the building from moving. It counteracts the movement.
Okay, so it pushes back.
Exactly. When seismic waves push the skyscraper one way, that massive 660-ton steel sphere, because of its sheer weight and how it's suspended, it resists that motion and swings in the opposite direction.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it essentially absorbs and dissipates the kinetic energy of the earthquake, dragging the whole building back to its center of gravity.
So it's fighting the sway of the building with its own delayed momentum.
That's a great way to put it, yeah.
But what really stood out in the reports from this specific magnitude 6.6 quake was the description of the movement on the ground. Because people didn't report that slow, nauseating rolling motion you sometimes get. They described it as a violent, jarring, up and down shaking.
Right, and the mechanism behind that specific sensation, it lies in the depth and the origin of the rupture. The geological data maps this as an exceptionally deep event, 95.7 kilometers below the surface.
Which is incredibly deep.
It is, and furthermore, it was what we call an intraplate earthquake.
Wait, okay, I always hear about tectonic plates grinding against each other at the edges. So intraplate implies this happened, like, right in the middle of a solid piece of crust.
That is the crucial distinction, yes. Most seismic activity we hear about is interplate occurring at the fault lines where two different plates collide or slide past one another.
Right, like the San Andreas Fault.
Exactly. But an intraplate quake occurs deep within the interior of a single continuous tectonic plate. So the immense pressure from the edges eventually causes the solid rock in the deep interior to fracture under the internal stress.
Man, it makes me think of bending a thick wooden dowel.
Yeah.
Like the pressure is coming from your hands at the ends, but when the tension reaches a critical point, the dowel snaps violently right in the middle.
That physical snap is exactly what generated the unique experience on the surface. Because this fracture happens so deep within solid, dense rock, the seismic waves it generates are remarkably high frequency.
Okay, and high frequency behaves differently.
Yeah, high-frequency waves don't typically induce that slow, rolling resonance that causes tall structures to sway dangerously.
Which explains why there were no major casualties reported in the broadcast.
Exactly. Those high-frequency waves, they travel almost vertically straight up to the surface. So by the time they hit ground level, they manifest as severe, highly localized up and down jolts. It is this massive release of physical energy that was, building invisibly for centuries.
Which brings us perfectly back to that hair salon in Taiwan. I mean, we go from tectonic plates snapping under invisible physical pressure to a plastic tub snapping under invisible chemical pressure.
It's the same underlying principle of tension, really.
Right. So a hairdresser had this neglected, unused tub of Taiwanese brand hair bleaching powder just sitting on a shelf. And out of nowhere, it undergoes spontaneous combustion. It just explodes into white smoke, leaves black char everywhere. How does an inert beauty product turn into a bomb?
Well, it has everything to do with the chemistry of oxidation. You see, hair bleach formulas rely heavily on compounds known as persulfates.
Persulfates, got it.
Yeah, and these are incredibly strong oxidizing agents. Their sole chemical purpose is to aggressively strip melanin, the pigment, from human hair. And to do that effectively, they have to be highly reactive.
So they're basically just constantly looking for a chemical partner to react with, and they're just trapped in this plastic tub.
That's it. And if the conditions change even slightly, that reactivity is unleashed. Like if the powder absorbs ambient moisture from the high humidity in a salon.
Which it's a salon, so there's always water running.
Exactly. Or if a microscopic contaminant, like dust or stray chemicals, falls into the container, It initiates a slow exothermic reaction.
Wait, exothermic meaning it creates its own heat.
Right, exothermic meaning the reaction itself generates heat as a byproduct.
But it's sitting inside a closed, sealed plastic container so that heat can't dissipate.
And that creates what we call a thermal runaway loop. The reaction generates heat, the increased temperature accelerates the chemical reaction, which in turn generates even more heat.
Oh man, it just feeds itself.
Exactly. The pressure and temperature compound exponentially until the compound reaches its autoignition point. The persulfates rapidly break down, releasing oxygen gas that feeds the combustion, and then the container bursts open in a cloud of smoke and fire.
That is terrifying because we treat these products as totally benign. We just chuck them in our cabinets under the sink. But these hidden chemical threats aren't just sitting on bathroom shelves. The broadcast also detailed a massive food safety interception at a produce market in New Taipei.
Yeah, the radish story. That one is eye-opening.
It really is. Inspectors found a shipment of imported white radishes that tested positive for a pesticide called clothianidin at 0.1 parts per million, which they noted is 5 times the legal limit.
And that discovery points to a really significant vulnerability in agricultural supply chains. Clothianidin belongs to a class of chemicals called neonicotinoids, and the key thing here is it is a systemic pesticide.
See, my first instinct as a consumer, if I hear there's pesticide on my vegetables, is just to scrub it vigorously in the sink or maybe just peel the outer layer off. Does that not work here?
Scrubbing or peeling is entirely useless against a systemic pesticide.
Wait, really? Completely useless.
Completely. Agricultural science divides these chemicals into 2 main categories. Contact pesticides are sprayed onto the plant, and they sit on the surface of the leaves or the skin of the fruit.
Right, so those you can wash off.
Usually, yes. Systemic pesticides, however, are applied directly to the soil, or they're actually coated onto the seed before planting.
So the plant is essentially drinking the pesticide as it grows.
Through its root system, yes.
Yeah.
The plant absorbs the chemical and distributes it through its vascular tissue, the xylem and phloem, into every single part of its structure. The leaves, the stems, and in the case of a radish, the edible taproot itself.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the clothianidin is integrated into the cellular matrix of the vegetable.
But wait, wouldn't cooking the radish break down the chemical compound? Like if I boil it in the soup, does the heat neutralize it?
Unfortunately, no. Neonicotinoids are remarkably heat stable. Boiling or roasting the radish might alter the vegetable's texture, but the chemical compound remains intact. The consumer ends up ingesting it.
That is so unsettling.
It is. And the broader issue the broadcast touches on is that global border inspections rely on random sampling, not comprehensive batch testing. So when an exporting country operates under different regulatory limits than the importing country, systemic chemicals easily bypass those visual inspections and end up right on your dinner plate.
Okay, so we've been looking at systems that operate under strict, unbreakable laws, right? Thermodynamics, botany, physics, they don't care about your intentions. A chemical loop will ignite whether you meant it to or not. But the moment you introduce human beings into a system, the rules get incredibly messy.
Oh, absolutely. The transition from the rigid laws of nature to the highly subjective laws of human society is always jarring.
Take this neighbor feud in Kaohsiung that the broadcast covered. It's one of those petty local disputes that accidentally creates a fascinating legal precedent.
I love this case. It's so revealing.
Right. So a woman was in this ongoing war with her neighbors, so she mounted a camera specifically to film them and report minor traffic violations. She caught one neighbor pulling his car away from the curb directly in front of his own house without using a turn signal, and he was hit with a 1,200 new Taiwan dollar fine.
And, under a strict literal reading of the traffic code, the fine is entirely justified. The law explicitly mandates the use of a turn signal when entering a roadway from a parked position.
Right. The law is the law. But the neighbor actually took this to court, and the judge revoked the ticket. The judge looked at the video evidence and noted that the camera was pointed at a private doorway. And more importantly, the footage proved there were absolutely no other vehicles, bicycles, or pedestrians anywhere in the vicinity.
Exactly. The context was key.
Right. The judge ruled that the failure to signal posed zero safety risk to anyone. But let me challenge that for a second. If a judge rules that a traffic law doesn't apply because context proves there was no immediate danger, doesn't that make every single stop sign and red light entirely subjective? I mean, how does the legal system prevent that from devolving into total chaos?
Well, that is the central tension of legal philosophy. What you are identifying is the friction between strict liability and the spirit of the law.
Okay, the spirit of the law.
Right. If we rely solely on strict liability where the action itself is a crime, regardless of intent or context, the law just becomes a mechanized weapon. It can be exploited by, angry neighbors using surveillance cameras.
Yeah, it just becomes an automated revenue generator for the city.
Exactly. But the judge in this Kaohsiung case drew a very specific boundary to prevent the chaos you mentioned. By revoking the ticket, the court affirmed that the fundamental purpose, the spirit of the traffic code, is to maintain public safety and prevent collisions.
So no danger, no foul, essentially.
Enforcing the letter of the law in a vacuum on a private curb with zero traffic serves no public safety interest. It was a localized ruling that prioritized human context over algorithmic enforcement.
It's actually somewhat comforting to know the legal system has that human flexibility. But then the broadcast highlights what happens when the people entrusted to enforce the system decide the rules just don't apply to them.
Yes, the Tainan police officer.
Yes. We get the story of a former Tainan police officer, a Mr. Wang. The timeline of his crimes is a masterclass in absurdity. First, he scales a wall armed with a sickle to steal 2 bunches of bananas from a local farmer.
Just bizarre.
2 weeks later, he returns to the exact same farm to steal avocado saplings. And then, during the internal investigation, it comes to light that he had a habit of stealing public toilet paper and his own colleagues' shampoo from the police precinct.
The consequences, though, were severe. He lost his police pension and received a 10-month prison sentence.
Which is wild, right? He actually tried to tell investigators that an old lady gave him permission to take the bananas.
Which nobody believed. His colleagues immediately testified that he was lying, bringing up the stolen shampoo as evidence of his character. And look, while stealing 2-ply toilet paper and bananas sounds trivial, the psychological mechanism driving it is profoundly dangerous when found in law enforcement.
Really? How so?
It is a textbook case of normalized deviance.
Normalized deviance. I've heard that term used in, engineering disasters, like space shuttle crashes. But how does it apply to a guy stealing fruit?
The principle is exactly the same. Normalized deviance occurs when people within an organization become so accustomed to a deviant behavior that they no longer consider it deviant. If a police officer steals shampoo from a coworker and faces zero pushback, his internal ethical boundary shifts. The brain literally rewires itself to justify the action.
So stealing public toilet paper suddenly feels like a perk of the job rather than theft.
Precisely. And once that threshold is crossed, scaling a farmer's wall with a sickle doesn't feel like a crime to him. It feels like an entitlement. When minor ethical breaches are tolerated within a system of authority, the entire foundation of rules rots from the inside out.
Wow. And we can take that exact concept of escalation, of testing boundaries and normalizing aggressive behavior, and apply it to the really high-stakes global geopolitics that were covered in the broadcast.
The mechanics of conflict escalation are surprisingly similar, whether it is an officer stealing avocados or nation-states testing each other's military boundaries.
It's just a difference of scale. Now, looking at the raw reports from the morning broadcast, the geopolitical landscape in late July 2026 is incredibly volatile. And just to be super clear with you listening, we are impartially reporting these geopolitical claims directly from the source material.
Right. We are not taking a side or endorsing any political viewpoint here. We're just analyzing the data from the broadcast.
Exactly. So the broadcast maps out claims from multiple actors. We have the U.S. and Iran locked in a severe escalation. On day 13 of the conflict, U.S. President Trump reportedly paused military strikes, looking for a potential deal.
Critical pause in the timeline.
Right. But at the same time, Iranian state media claims they have destroyed multiple U.S. planes, though those reports are unverified. Meanwhile, satellite photos show a U.S. ammunition depot completely leveled in Jordan, and Houthi rebels are launching ballistic missiles at sensitive Saudi Aramco oil facilities.
When you look at that constellation of events, the traditional idea of a localized battlefield is just completely absent.
It's entirely borderless. We're talking about Jordan, the Gulf, Saudi Arabia, all lighting up simultaneously.
And there is one specific detail tucked into those damage reports that reveals the true architecture of modern warfare. Alongside the physical ammunition depots and the oil facilities, an Amazon data center was hit in the crossfire.
An Amazon server farm, not a military base, not a weapons manufacturer, but a massive warehouse full of computer racks.
This represents a fundamental shift in kinetic warfare. Historically, you bomb a factory to stop your enemy from building tanks. Today, you strike a data center to paralyze the digital supply chain. Modern conflicts target the invisible infrastructure that runs the global economy.
Because a data center isn't just holding emails, it's housing cloud computing for financial institutions, logistics databases for global shipping, and the communications networks that hospitals and governments rely on.
Absolutely. Striking a data center disrupts the flow of capital and information globally. These facilities, they require massive amounts of power, specialized cooling systems, and physical fiber optic trunk lines.
They're physical targets.
Exactly. They are highly vulnerable physical locations that house our intangible digital lives. The front line is no longer just a geographic border, it is the physical hardware of the internet itself.
When you combine that level of borderless geopolitical dread with the unpredictability of daily life, and, the broadcast also covered a tragic terror attack at the Berlin Pride Parade that left one dead and dozens injured by an extremist, you just get an environment of constant, exhausting anxiety. It makes perfect sense why society looks for an escape hatch.
It really does. The psychological toll of a high-threat environment drives a very deep human need for narrative resolution.
Which perfectly explains why the broadcast dedicated significant time to the ultimate form of modern escapism. San Diego Comic-Con 2026.
A total shift in tone, but culturally so important.
Huge. Marvel made some massive announcements that dominated the news cycle right alongside these wars and earthquakes. Robert Downey Jr. is returning to the franchise, but this time playing the villain Dr. Doom. Ryan Gosling is officially joining as Ghost Rider. And British actor David John is stepping in to play T'Challa's son, taking on the mantle of the new Black Panther.
Some major casting news there.
Right. But why do these casting announcements hold the same weight as global news?
Because pop culture serves as a collective psychological defense mechanism. In highly chaotic, unpredictable times, audiences crave the return of familiar, grounding archetypes.
But wait, Robert Downey Jr. is coming back as the bad guy.
Yeah.
Why does a villain bring us comfort?
Because it is a villain contained within a predictable structure.
Oh, I see.
Right. The appeal of these massive cinematic universes is that they offer controlled chaos. The stakes are portrayed as universally catastrophic. The fate of the world is always hanging in the balance. But the outcome is guaranteed by the genre. Going into the theater that there will be a third act resolution. The narrative will ultimately make sense.
And with the Black Panther announcement, casting David John as T'Challa's son, it's a narrative about legacy and continuation. It's a storyline that pushes back against the sudden finality and loss we experience in the real world.
That is a profound way to look at it, actually. We want to watch Dr. Doom try to destroy the world or Ghost Rider act as a spirit of vengeance because we know someone is going to restore order in exactly 2 hours and 15 minutes.
It provides a synthetic sense of stability when the real world offers none.
Exactly.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today, starting with the illusion of stability and tracking how invisible forces dictate our reality. We looked at the immense tectonic pressure snapping 95 kilometers underground and the thermal runaway of oxidizing chemicals in a hair salon.
So many invisible forces.
Yeah. We explored the invisible vascular system of a radish carrying systemic pesticides, the delicate balance between the letter and the spirit of the law in a traffic court, the slow rot of normalized deviance in a police department, and the digital battlefields of modern geopolitics.
The underlying current through all of these stories is that chaos is always humming just beneath the surface. But by dissecting the mechanisms, understanding the chemistry, the legal philosophy, the structural engineering, the world becomes decipherable.
Which makes it a little less scary.
Exactly. Comprehension is the best antidote to fear.
Before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with a thought based on that Amazon data center attack. We think of the cloud as this magical, abstract space where all our photos, bank records, and digital identities live forever.
But it's very much physical.
It's just a physical building full of someone else's computers. It relies on thousands of miles of undersea fiber optic cables and massive, vulnerable power grids. If a major geopolitical war were to intentionally sever those physical connections and destroy the hardware, what happens to you?
It's a daunting question.
Are you prepared for your entire digital existence, your financial history, and your personal identity to simply vanish as collateral damage in a physical war?
It really forces you to realize that our digital ground is just as fragile as the tectonic plates beneath our feet.
It definitely makes you look at your smartphone a little differently, doesn't it? Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the news cycle of July 2026. Stay curious, keep questioning the systems around you, and we'll catch you next time.